people, how are you doing? I hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you guys the absolute tactical genius that was Graham Potter at the likes of Brighton Munich, some have described it as. I will be showing you guys the 3-4-3 tactics, as well as the 3-4-1-2 tactics that they have also used in the past. Obviously all of this is in the past, as well as the defensive structure and setup that they did tend to try and shift into in certain moments, and that is the 4-4-2 formation. This is a very good pressing, high risk, high reward type structure that they would try and shift into, win the ball back, and then obviously look to try and progress up the field. They would also use this structure with both the other formations. Obviously on the defensive side of things, they would shift into this and then look to try and be very aggressive with their defensive outlets. So starting off with the 3-4-3 formation, I've gone with the 3-4-3 flats, and obviously I've just dropped down the wider midfielders into wing-back areas to obviously try and get them into those correct defensive positions. As well as I've also somewhat dropped the two central midfielders slightly deeper. So it is essentially one goalkeeper, three centre-backs, two central midfielders, two wing-backs, two wingers, and then of course one striker. Now for the tactics going forward, there is a running theme without the course of this video and throughout the course of these other tactics that we will be discussing, but the tactical vision that I've gone with is wing play. Obviously trying to work the ball into those wide areas was a must for Brighton to try and open up a lot of space in the central departments of the field to try and get the best out of those central players at times, as well as for your attackers to have a bit more space in and around them. As for the defensive style, they would look to aggressively press, yes, but more so when the opposition were in a hurry or under pressure or ready to make a mistake. They would look to obviously be very aggressive with that. So that's why pressing pressing on a heavy touch is more effective than pressing after loss of possession, having that constant pressure. But you will also see with the instructions that the forwards tend to press quite effectively high up the field and then inevitably force the opposition into going long and playing into the hands of your midfield area. As for the team width, I have set it to quite a widespread team width, set to 65. Of course, you have very compact central defenders, so you don't need to worry about that area. As well as you want your your midfield departments as well as your wingbacks to be a bit more stretched on those wider areas of the field to try and prevent those crosses being fired into the box. And like I say, you have three strong centre backs that are very capable of winning the ball, as well as a decent goalkeeper who can also do a very effective job. As for the depth, like I say, there's a running theme with all these tactics, right? You'll see that Graham Potter did tend to set up his team in a mid-block or a high mid-block at times. So that's why I've set it to 55. It's very effective in and out of possession, very effective in preventing you from being exposed on the break, on the counter-attack. You are very stitched, I would say, when it comes to the pace in the back line. Of course, at that time they had the likes of Duffy and Byrne as well as Dunk, who are not very quick whatsoever. But with obviously this, you've got the likes of Igor, Dunk, and Webster. Now, Igor is relatively quick. The likes of Dunk, not so much. But the likes of Adam Webster is he's okay when it comes to the pace side of things. So you can't be hyper exposed when it comes to the counter attacks. As for the offense, the build-up play is set to balance. Now, they could go quite long. Of course, you want the likes of Dunk to stand on the ball and look to create over the top with any potential runs in behind, which you will tend to do more times than not. But at the same time, you still want to incorporate the ability for the players to build up slowly from the back, and this will inevitably show that the centre backs are going to try and show for the ball, collect it, get on the ball as much as possible, and then obviously look to try and play out from the back. So you can look to incorporate all three of these aspects. Also the fast build up approach you can also look to do. So you want to try and incorporate everything, right? And more so the balanced approach does allow you to do so. As for the chance creation, it is set to possession. Now, Graham Potter instilled a possession-based style of football into this Brighton side. That's why they've been dubbed Brighton Munich. Very good on the ball, all of their players. The players that they've brought in, it suited the tactical setup of the coach, of the style of play. Very comfortable on the ball, very comfortable under pressure from the opposition. Being able to play out through the press of the opposition is very, very good, and what you are trying to do more times than not. As for the width, it is set to 75, and like I said earlier, you are trying to open up a bit more space in the central areas of the pitch, whether you're playing with a three-man midfield or a two-man midfield. You want to try and generate as much space for them to have those little pockets of space to operate and effectively try and get the offensive system going in. So you also obviously have a lot of players out wide. You have your wing backs as well as your wingers in those wide areas, so you also want to try and get them the ball as much as possible. As for the players in the box, it is set to 7. Of course, you'll have your 3 forwards and sometimes one of your number 6s / number 8s, and sometimes one of your wing backs making their runs into the box. As for the corners and the free kicks, as always, I've set it to 4. Now onto the instructions at the back with the goalkeeper. Of course, it was Matt Ryan at the time. And even with a mid-block, the likes of Graham Potter did always want his keeper to be very proactive with being able to run out of the box and be a very modern day sweeper keeper. So that's why essentially we've gone with him to be a sweeper keeper. And then for the saving on crosses, he wasn't amazing at claiming those balls, but at the same time he wasn't bad at it either. So when in doubt, he was very capable of doing so. That's why I've gone with the balanced approach. As for your three centre backs now, we've got the likes of Igor, who was playing as the Dan Burn role, obviously Dunk, and then of course Duffy. So for the likes of Webster, he's got his base set of instructions. The likes of Dunk is said to be a bit more of a sweeper to him, so he's gone for the more of the conservative approach. So the other two will be very aggressive, or more aggressive, I should say, than in trying to win the ball back than what Dunk will be, and he'll look to try and have the recovery to try and win those secondary balls. As for the likes of Dan Burn, so he was obviously a centre back that was also used as a fullback at times, and in this system he was allowed and given the license to be able to get forward, help support in those wide areas, specifically in the left-hand channel. So in order to try and replicate that role for him, I've told him to overlap. Now this will obviously help him create those overlapping runs on the outside, on the left-hand side specifically, and then obviously for the rest of his instructions, I've set it to the basic. Into your midfield now, we've got the likes of De Hoot as well as Gilmore. And obviously, this was a very rotational midfield. Of course, you had Basuma in there. You had the likes of Pascal Gross featuring in the midfield, but obviously we're playing him slightly higher up now. So for the midfield, they've got very similar roles. Balanced attack, so yes, having the ability to have the box-to-box role and the box-to-box mentality. You want that for your midfield too. The support on crosses is set to stand on the edge of the box, looking to try and claim those secondary balls outside of the area, look to try and rotate them back into play, look to try and potentially pop off shots from just outside the attacking third, and trying to obviously always work the goalkeeper. As for the interceptions, I've set it to normal, and then cover the wing, as well as free roam. Now you want them to be able to feature in those little half spaces that do arise in your half, obviously with the goalkeeper restarts, as well as in and around the central areas of the pitch. You want them always popping up in the little half spaces, showing for the ball as much as possible. Of course, you are playing a possession-based brand of football, so you need them to be very much in tune with that, and therefore showing themselves for the ball as much as possible. The defensive positioning is set to cover the wing, so when your wing backs don't get back in time, you do have central midfielders that can drift into those wide areas, pick up the runners, pick up the men, prevent those crosses being fired into the box. As you can see for the other midfielder, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Onto your wing backs now, we've got the likes of Lamptey and March. Obviously, Lamptey and March were still playing for Graham Potter at that time. So they are both obviously instructed to join the attack. Very much the outlet in this team when going forward, being very aggressive in those wider areas of the pitch, progressing the ball quite a lot into those wider areas of the pitch as much as possible. Interceptions are set to aggressive, obviously creating that very pressing, aggressive nature that you are trying to implement, forcing those mistakes and errors from the opposition. The run type, I've set it to mix. Now, sometimes you would see one of the wingbacks tuck in a bit more, be a bit more involved in the central areas, lending themselves into those central areas for that extra pass. So that's why for the run type, it's not set to overlap only. You can have them inverting every now and then. As for the defensive positioning, you want them to be nice and close to the opposition winger, or maybe their fullback at times, and make sure that they are being made very aware that your wingback is very much in tune and very much in around their area. As you can see for the likes of Solly March, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Onto the likes of Pascal Gross. Now he has a slightly differing role compared to the other two forwards, obviously playing as a right wing in this formation. So he's set to come back on defense, cut inside, and then come short. So he would often look to try and drop a bit deeper, drop into the more of the central role, almost taking up a number 10 role at times, and look to try and either pull a man out of possession, opening up a bit more space for the likes of the on-running Lamptey, or potentially look to try and drop into the half space, create for the other two forwards, and then be a very much a pain in the opposition side. Sometimes showing as a bit of a wider pivot in certain moments, being a very effective player as that right wing. His interceptions is set to aggressive, like I mentioned earlier. The front line with all of these formations look to aggressively press the opposition goalkeeper or the back line, forcing them to go long more times than not. As for the support on crosses, I've set it to balanced, often being involved in the attacking play in and around the attacking third, but at the same time also choosing to sometimes stay on the edge of the area and trying to create, opening up a bit more space for the likes of a Gilmore or a Dahoud or maybe even a Lamptey to try and work their way into the box. As for your other two players, I should say, the likes of Trossard as well as Morpay, or it could have been Danny Welbeck at the time as well. So we'll start off with Trossard. He is set to a basic defensive support, so not always choosing to come back, but doing an effective job with staying forward at the same time. His transgression is set to cut inside. Now, you do want him to have the ability to cut in from the left-hand side, pop off shots. Trossard is a very good goal-scoring inside forward, so you want to still try and replicate that role for him, as well as the ability for them to get in behind, trying to exploit the opposition with. And this will more or less play into the hands of the likes of Lewis Dunk playing those long balls in behind. The interceptions are set to aggressive, as well as he needs to be able to get into the box, breaking into the box more times than not. As for the likes of Ferguson, or it was McConnelly at that time, or could have been Danny Welbeck, like I said, set to drift wide, often interchanging positions with the likes of Trossard. Getting in behind is essential, as well as the aggressive interceptions. And then finally, the basic defensive support is set to be on for him, so he can choose to drop off a bit more, or potentially stay higher up the field and be a bit more of an out there ball. Now onto the 3-4-1-2 formation. Of course, they would look to try and shift every now and then, trying to create overloads in the midfield areas as much as possible. So as you can see here for the formation, I've made no real changes to it. I may have just dropped the wider midfielders ever so slightly down, but at the same time, this will also encourage them to be a bit more aggressive compared to the 3-4-3 formation, as you are playing with wider midfielders and not wingbacks. So they do tend to get slightly higher up the field when in use of this formation. But as you can see here, it is 1 goalkeeper, 3 centre backs, 2 central midfielders, 2 wider midfielders, 1 attacking midfielder, and then of course 2 strikers. So moving on to the tactics, it's still set to wing play with the defensive style, still set to pressure on heavy touch. There's no real changes to this formation, I will say that. Everything is more or less all the same. So taking a look at the instructions, there are a few changes to it. So the goalkeeper, there's no major changes. He's still going to be a super keeper, and the saving on crosses is still set to balanced. Whereas your backline, more or less still the same set of instructions, a basic balanced approach for the likes of Webster on the right-hand side. Dunk will still be the sweeper of the 3, as well as the likes of Dan Burns / Igor. He's still going to look to try and drift into those wider channels. Onto your midfield now, the likes of De Hout and Gilmore. They are set to the same set of instructions, set to stay back while attacking. Of course, they are playing as central midfielders, and they are playing slightly higher up the field, so you do want them to be able to track back when required. The support on crosses is still set to stay on the edge of the box, with the interception set to normal. Cover the wing, of course, looking to drift into those wide areas of the pitch, trying to pick up the runners if the likes of Lamptey and March have not come back yet. And then, just like with before, you want both of them to try and show for the ball in those little half spaces, pop up, show themselves, show that they are a passing option for one of your centre-backs to try and play the ball into. As you can see for the likes of De Hout, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Onto the likes of March now, both March and Lamptey playing as higher up wing backs, you could say, or / wider midfielders. So both of them have the same set of instructions: come back on defense, stay wide. And then for the support runs, just like the main reason why I kept the wing back role to not invert or overlap, you more or less want to try and help them create that role again. So you can have them as getting behind, looking to try and constantly penetrate and exploit the opposition with, or sometimes having them drop a bit more central, link up with the midfield, creating overloads in that central area of the park as much as possible. Both Lamptey and March are very capable of doing so. As you'll also see here for the interceptions, I've set it to aggressive, still maintaining that very aggressive nature in those out wide positions. And then the supports on crosses for both of them is set to a balanced approach. So sometimes breaking into the box, being that extra man at the back post, or potentially staying on the edge of the box, looking to try and create for others. As you can see here for the likes of Lamptey, he's got the same set of instructions just as March does. Into your number 10 position, we've got the likes of Pascal Gross. Now, with the 3-4-3 formation, Pascal Gross does drop a bit deeper, does come a bit more central, so more or less creating a wider number 10 in that formation. But in this situation, he is more of a natural number 10. So he's set to come back on defense, looking to try and drop a bit deeper, link up a bit more with the likes of De Hout and Gilmore in certain moments. The support on crosses is set to balance, so sometimes breaking into the box, being an extra man in and around that attacking third. But the positioning freedom I've told him to do is to have a drift wide approach. So drifting to try and help out support in those wide areas, whether it's the left or the right hand side, trying to support the likes of Lamptey or March as much as possible. As for the interceptions, I've set it to aggressive. And as you'll see here for your 2 strikers, we'll start off with the likes of Ferguson or / Danny Welbeck. I don't know why I didn't actually use Danny Welbeck, because he's still in the team. But anyway, well, I've used Ferguson for this. The support runs are set to balance, so he more times than not, Danny Welbeck would try and drift in and out of the central areas of the pitch, so you want him to have a very balanced approach with that. The target man approach was very much in tune and intact with this setup, because one of your forwards would play off the other, and more so you need at least one of them to be a target man. The interceptions are set to aggressive, looking to consistently close down the opposition's backline or their goalkeeper. And then for this right-handed sided striker, they are going to be the outlet ball, so they're going to be told to stay forward. So for the counter-attacking situations, you want them very much involved higher up the field. As for the likes of Matoma / Trossard, of course, Trossard is more of a winger, but playing as a striker. I mean, we saw the likes of Trossard go to Anfield with Brighton, of course, and bang in a hat-trick, playing as a striker, might I say. So he was Trossard just in general, even now playing for Arsenal, he's very good at being able to play as a striker or as a false nine, or potentially play on the wing. So a very mixed bag of results when it comes to Trossard. But in this formation, he was playing as a striker, right? So for the support runs, I've set it to a balance width. So again, choosing whether he could drift more centrally or slightly out wider. The attacking runs is set to a false nine. Like I said, very good at playing as a false nine, being able to drop off the back line, link up with the midfield, at the same time also be very much involved in attacking the opposition as much as possible. The interceptions is set to aggressive, and then finally the defensive support to help him with that false nine approach. It is set to a basic defensive support, so sometimes staying high up the field, other times looking to drop a bit deeper and link up play a bit more. Now moving on to the 4-4-2 formation that they would look to try and revert into, whether it was the 3-4-3 formation or the 3-4-1-2 formation, they would always look to try and revert onto the defensive side of things into this formation right here. So for the formation going forward, it is a 4-4-2 flat. I've made no major changes to it, so it's one goalkeeper, two centre-backs, two full-backs, two central midfielders, two wider midfielders, and then of course, two strikers. So moving on to the tactical side of things now, mainly these tactics haven't really changed too much. It's still set to wing play with pressure on heavy touch still required, but on the defensive side of things, of course, it is going to be your defensive formation that you try and revert into. It's a slightly deeper mid-block, as well as a slightly more narrow team set to 60 and 45 respectively, but on the offensive side of things, the tactics are more or less still the same. Onto the instructions now, starting off at the back with the goalkeeper. He's still got the same set of instructions, no major changes to him, whereas your back two, essentially, Webster, he's got the base set of instructions, whereas the likes of Dunk will still have the conservative interceptions role, still looking to be as much of a sweeper centre-back as he can. The likes of Dan Burn out wide now, of course, playing as a left-back, even though he's a centre-back, but he would have the freedom in this left-back role to be able to progress the ball forward and get forward nice and high up the field, providing those outlet balls into those wider channels. So he is set to join the attack, overlap, as well as stick to position, just like the likes of Lamptey, a bit more of an effective right-back that would bomb on, but again, still set to join the attack, overlap, as well as stick to position. Into your midfield now, both your midfielders will have very similar roles. I will say that the right-hand side is a bit more of a box-to-box type role, in terms of the ability for the player to make sure that he can get into the box when required. So both of them are set to stay back while attacking, still providing that double pivot, sitting deep, making sure that they can, look to try and control the game that's in front of them. But at the same time, for this right-hand side, the support on crosses is set to balance, so they can choose whether they are, pressing high up the field if they do win the ball. This player, specifically the right-hand side, can look to break into the box if needed. As for the interceptions, it is set to normal, to cover the wing, and then of course free roam, as you'll see here for the left-handed side, stay back while attacking and stay on the edge of the box for the cross, so never essentially breaking into that attacking third. Normal interceptions are set to be on for him, as well as cover the wing and then free roam. Just like with the other instructions, you still want your double pivot more centrally to be able to pop up in little half spaces, showing for the ball when building up from the back. So you can more or less use this formation not only as a defensive formation, but also when going into the higher stakes type games, more or less like the Liverpools or the Manchester Cities, where you're trying to set up your two banks of four, make it very hard to break down, but at the same time have a very good fluid flowing offensive outlets. As for your wider players, of course, you've got the likes of Solly March and Pascal Gross, slightly varying and differing roles between the two, but we'll start off with March here, set to come back on defense and have a balance width, so sometimes choosing to cut inside, other times looking to stay a bit wider, link up a bit more with the on-running Dan Burn. The support runs is also set to a balanced approach, so yes, you can make those runs in behind, or potentially drift a bit more central and link up a bit more with the midfield. As for the interceptions, it's set to aggressive, and for the support on crosses, you want them staying wide to try and supply those secondary balls, or potentially just those crosses into the box for the forwards. As you'll see here for the likes of Pascal Gross, he's got also a very differing role, so he's also told to come back on defense. Of course, it's a very defensive structure that you're trying to go with, but the chance creation is set to free roam, as well as the support runs are set to come short, so he will look to try and drift a bit more centrally, essentially pulling out the opposition fullback and vacating a lot of space for the likes of Lamptey to try and work into. As you can see here, for the interceptions, it's set to aggressive, and then of course for the supports and crosses, just like with the left-hand side, the right-hand side is going to be told to stay on the edge of the box. So moving on into our forward line, of course, we've got the likes of Danny Welbeck / Ferguson. He is set to having a balance width as well as a mixed attacking run type, so he can look to try and break in behind or potentially be a bit more of a natural target man, hold up number 9, holding up the ball and linking it up with the players in and around him, or potentially at times dropping off the back line and dropping a bit deeper to get on the ball. The interceptions is set to aggressive, still looking to try and close down the opposition backline, forcing him into those long balls, as well as the ability for him to stay forward and be the outlet ball. As for the likes of Trossard / Matoma, he is set to having a balance width as well as playing as a false 9, just like with the 3-4-1-2 system. He's still going to look to try and be the forward that drops a bit deeper, gets on the ball a bit more, and links up a bit more in certain moments with the other players in and around him. The interceptions are still set to aggressive, as well as the defensive support is set to basic. So there you have it, people. That is my version of Graham Potter's various different systems. Out of 10, I would definitely give, as a whole package, I would definitely give this an 8. I think it's a very effective, very useful, and it can get the best out of low-rated players. I think it's a very effective system in FC24. So if you guys can let me know down below what you would rate the system out of 10, that would be fan-damn-tastic. But as per always, if you can, hit that like button down below, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm out.